Welcome and hello. This is a video tutorial in MODSIM, and in this lesson, we're going to be talking about rent pools and water service contracts. These are two different mechanisms of ways to transfer water between users in MODSIM. So let's go ahead and get started. What I have on the screen here is a network that I've already sketched out. And the general idea behind water transfers is that if a water right holder has an abundance of water entitlement in a certain water year, then they can submit an amount of that water to be purchased by a different user who seeks to augment their water entitlement for that year or for that time period if there's multiple time periods in the year. We're going to start by looking at rent pools first, and then after that, we'll look at the water service contracts. All right. So before anything, we first need to toggle on the extension for storage accounts. Go up to MODSIM extensions, and I already have it turned on, but this first one here, storage right extension, check that on, click apply, and click OK. All right, then we're going to go up to MODSIM, click on the network settings. In the general tab, I have the conditional rules toggled on, which is going to allow me to use different hydraulic states. I have a hydraulic state table defined here. Here are my factors for the boundaries. So I just wanted to point that out that this H table 1 pops up a couple other places, specifically down here. It looks like the dependencies already listed out. So anyway, let's talk about the storage allocation logic tab. If I click this tab, now for rent pool, I can specify which months of the year or which time periods of the year that the rent pool recharges or restarts. Now, you may only have 1 month if you're using a 1 month time step, and that would repeat year after year. Let's go ahead and select January and July, though. So they're kind of on opposite sides of the calendar, 6 months apart. If you happen to not be using a 1 month time step, so here's the time step tab. I currently have it set to month, 1 month. But if it's a smaller time period, I could set it to day, for instance. In which case, if I go back to my storage allocation logic tab, then the rent pool dates are, it has a column for month, and then it also has a column for the day of the month. So you can specify multiple days for each month for the duration of your simulation. Okay, so just let you know you have that flexibility there. I'm going to go ahead and just switch it back to monthly time step though. So there's that. Okay, it's telling me that I'm going to, overwrite my existing data for the storage allocation logic tab, and that's fine. So click OK. Boom. Now I'm back to the monthly time step where I get to select my month. Okay. Once that month begins or that time period begins that's listed in the rent month pool, that's when the renter is entitled to the water that they purchased in the rent pool. So we have two different parties at hand here. There is the renter and there is the owner who contributes. Or you could say subscriber is the purchaser and the owner is the contributor. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the details in the model I've already set up. Here's the reservoir, Res1. I'm going to open up the properties. And then in the general tab, you see the size of the reservoir is 1 million acre feet. I'm starting it as an initial volume of 1 million acre feet. That's probably not realistic, but that's just what I'm using. And then I also have priorities set here for the wet, average, and dry hydraulic states. Over in the storage rights tab, I have three different storage rights, and they are divided into A, B, and C listed here. I sort them by A, B, and C. And then the account volume is 500,000 acre feet, 300,000 acre feet, and 200,000 acre feet. The initial volume is probably going to be 0. I set it to the same thing as the total volume. So that may be different, but the account volume right here, that's what's important. That's what needs to add up to let's see, click on general, to this value right here minus this value. So yeah, initial would also have to sum up to the difference between initial and minimum. Okay. All right, let's take a look at our link to D2. I'm calling D2 the senior owner, the senior water right, who has more water than he needs, so he's contributing. And then D1 is going to be the purchaser or the subscriber. So if I open up the multi-link to D2 properties, I have 4 different links. First, the natural link, which is standard type, and then links A, B, and C right here are the storage contract type, and then the order of use is also in that order. So let's go ahead and take a look at A. Open up the link. What we have here is the ownership amount and the initial amount. That's in volume of acre feet. And then down below here for rent pool, I do not have any information entered here, and that's on purpose because this water is not for sale. It's not going to enter the rent pool. So let me just close that. However, storage contract link C here I'm going to click on edit. And then what I have towards the bottom is I've selected the hydraulic state table, HT table 1. And then for each of the hydraulic states, dry, average, and wet, I have the amount of water in units of acre feet that this particular owner is willing to contribute to the rent pool. So taking a step back, this owner is not willing to part ways with A or B, which is 500,000 and 300,000 acre feet for a total of 800,000 acre feet. But the remaining 200,000 acre feet, this owner at D2, demand D2, is willing to sell either 100,000, 150,000, or 200,000 acre feet of water, contribute that to the rent pool based on the hydraulic state being dry, average, or wet. Now remember, there can be up to 7 hydraulic states. I'm just using 3 right here to keep it simple, but there could be more than just 3 in this table. Okay, keep these 3 numbers in mind, a positive 100,000, 150,000, and 200,000. Now I'm going to check out the links associated with the multi-link to D1. I'm going to go right-click, Properties, and now I have 2 links. There's the natural flow link, and then what I'm calling Contract Res 1C associated with D1. Open the add up for edits. And then down below in the rent pool, what I have is the same hydraulic table, H table 1, but for dry, average, and wet, I have negative values. And they're also decreasing in magnitude, which probably makes sense. So if it's a dry year, what this means is this particular owner, this junior water rights owner who wants to augment their water supply, is willing to purchase up to 100,000 acre feet of water. In the average year, they're willing to, I should say, the average hydraulic state, they're willing to purchase 75,000 acre feet of water. And then in the wet year, they're willing to purchase only 50,000 acre feet of water. So for instance, if D1 is the only subscriber and D2 is the only contributor to the rent pool of water for this particular time period, and it happens to be an average hydraulic state according to H table 1, then subscriber D1 is willing to purchase 75,000 acre feet of water. However, if you think back to that other table, contributor D2 is willing to sell as much as 150,000 acre feet per water. So in that situation, 75,000 acre feet of water would be purchased, and then I guess the remaining 75,000 acre feet of water would not be purchased unless there was another buyer or subscriber who's looking for water to augment their supplies. So yeah, basically as the hydraulic condition increases, it's likely you'll see less and less subscribers and more contributors. So the price would be lower as the supply increases. Basic supply and demand, but this is not some sort of free market, Wild West situation. This is a highly regulated mechanism for transferring water between multiple water users to reduce the excess and also reduce the shortage amongst the total amount of water supplied and water used. This water right here for D1 is selected in the right name. This is the same water right that was selected by the contributor D2 when selling the water through the rent pool. So if we look at the data table for the reservoir 1, open up the properties, click on storage rights, and we click on that storage right D2-C, then edit, and then click on right users. We see those 2 different right users here. The ownership amount is 200,000, and that is associated with D2 because this is the owner who actually owns that amount of water. And then for D1, that is a negative value because there's no ownership. One more thing the user's manual points out that I probably should have mentioned when I was talking about it. I'm going to go ahead and edit this one once again. So what we have is these numbers. If they're positive, that means the water is for sale. And then as we saw, if it's negative, that means the owner wants to make a purchase. You cannot have a hydraulic table or a rent pool table with different hydraulic states, some of which are positive and some of which are negative. They either all need to be positive or they all need to be negative. If a user wants to potentially buy or sell their water based on the hydraulic state, they'd have to set up multiple links. associated with different storage rights. Rent pool contracts automatically carry over from year to year or time period to time period. However, that's different from water service contracts. So let's talk about the water service contracts now. This is the other mechanism for transferring water. There are some differences and similarities. The similarities are that there's potentially multiple buyers. It involves the transfer of water rights for a set time period, and it also uses the same rent pool functionality within MODSIM. But some of the differences are that there is only one seller. In the case of water service contracts, the entire storage space is rented out by a single owner to multiple purchasers or multiple subscribers. And also, the purchase amount is not a fixed volume of storage, but rather a percentage that the reservoir happens to fill up for that year. Okay, I'm going to bring up a PDF file. This is the user's manual, and we're on page 112 here. At the bottom of the page, it actually says 108, but anyway, 112 in the file. With water service contracts, the reservoir owner is represented as a demand node with an ownership link. And each year, that owner rents the entire storage space to the individual water users as a percentage of the reservoir fill. So right down here, you see this diagram. We have inflow, we have the storage right reservoir, and then over here is the bureau. This is the owner of 100% of the storage in the storage right reservoir. And they're going to sell two-thirds of their water to this two-thirds demand user and one-third of the water in the reservoir to this one-third demand user. That's just the name. So we're going to have multi-links representing natural flow and the contracted amount for all of the users who make a purchase. All right, I'm going to scroll down here and show some of the screenshots to explain it. What we have here, this link between the diversion node and the bureau is shown here. The link type will be storage contract, and then you'll select the contract. This contract will represent 100% of the storage in that reservoir. And then down below here, we have the ownership link and then the rent pool volumes that are available for sale. Now, I'm not sure what the units they're using are here, but the total volume is 300 units. So I'll just say units. And then, regardless of the hydraulic state, that total amount of 300 units is going to be set for all of the hydraulic states, dry, average, and wet. Or if you have, 5, 6, or 7 hydraulic states, it would always be that same total amount. The initial volume, yeah, it probably starts off at 0 unless there's some sort of carryover of volume from the previous time period. But if not, just go ahead and set that to 0. If you were going to create a separate link here for storage contract for the purchasers or the subscribers, what that would look like is pretty much the same thing. It'd be the same right name. However, down here, what you do is type in the negative amount of 300 that you are going to purchase. So in the case of two-thirds and one-third, that would be 200 and 100 of the total 300. And remember, that would have to be a negative number. So you would type in negative 200, negative 200, negative 200, or negative 100, negative 100, negative 100. Again, that doesn't guarantee 200 or 100 units of water if the purchase is made. Say, for instance, that the reservoir only gets 240 units on a single year, then that would be divvied up by 160 units and 80 units. Or if it's, say, 210 units, that would be 140 and 70. So, right, just keep that in mind. One last feature that the user manual mentions in this discussion is if you go up to enable an extension right here called last fill link extension, what that's going to do is add a checkbox to the storage contract link. We go ahead and open one up here. Let's go with this and edit link. Okay, so down here near the bottom, there's this checkbox for last fill rule. This option ensures that storage for lower priority water uses gets refilled only after storage for higher priority water uses gets filled up. So if you leave it unchecked, and that's what it is by default, then you're not going to lose your priority. But if you go ahead and check that checkbox, then it will downgrade the refill priority of that water space to be the last fill status. Okay, so go ahead and leave that unchecked unless you have good reason to check it. Why? Okay. All right. Well, that was it for this lesson. We talked about two different types of transferring water. There was the rent pool mechanism and then water service contracts.